Welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. I'm Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu. Thank you very much for listening in. Appreciate it as always. This is a big one, this episode. It's the start of autumn, start of fall, depending on which part of the world you come from. But it's a really important time for our bonsai. A lot goes on with trees during this period when they make this transition from summer to autumn, where we need to get actively involved with them and help them and prepare them as well as we possibly can to make sure that not only do they survive, but they thrive. We can do a lot in this period with fertilizing our trees to really build their strength up and to give them a good kick along as they head towards the winter dormancy period, but also what's going to happen after that. And this is where we can really make a massive difference with our trees. I used to only fertilize predominantly in spring because that was the time that I saw, flowers around the garden and veggies would start coming out of the hardware stores and you'd be like, oh, okay, I've got to feed this stuff. But for me, the most important feeding time of the year that we have with our bonsai is this time right now. So starting from now, right the way through until the dormancy period. So it's worthwhile actually being prepared for it, getting into it and doing it as soon as you possibly can. So I want to talk a lot about that today, but I also want to talk about a tip that I've got for you when it comes to completing the design of your bonsai, the last step in the process of creating a beautiful bonsai. So I'll get into that next. If you go back through the archives of this podcast, I guarantee you'll hear the word fertilizing and watering system quite a lot as you go back. But it is one of those things I think that makes a massive difference between collections, between your satisfaction, but also more importantly, how well your trees are doing. Fertilizing is one of those things that when I first sit down with people and I talk about bonsai, and it's not about how to wire a tree or how to style it for flow and movement. It's more about how to keep your tree really strong, but also to make it have the ability to take steps forward. That's the most important part. And fertilizing is absolutely key to that. And I think that if you can make one change to how you maintain your trees, how you look after your trees, then I would strongly suggest that fertilizing becomes key and paramount to what you do. And there's a million different ways to fertilize. There's a million different things you can use to fertilize. The best advice I can give you is I'll tell you what I do and the reasons why I do it, and then you've got to make your own mind up because different parts of the world have different flavors of the month as to how they fertilize. Sometimes your environment dictates to you how you can fertilize. You can't, if you're in a small apartment, then using something like an organic pellet fertilizer that stinks to high heaven may not be an option for you. You may not be able to do certain things. So I'd strongly suggest that just do what is best for you and for your trees, and the very best of what you can do. Don't cut corners. Don't go to the easiest one. Do what you can do, because there's different scales of ability to fertilize that people can do, but it's the consistency of the application of the fertilizer throughout really important times of the year, being spring and autumn, that make a massive difference to your collection. And fertilizing is not one of those things that you do once at the start of the autumn period and then forget about it. It's something that needs to be redone over and over and over, because whatever fertilizer you're using, it's going to be depleted. It's going to run out. And, if you think about it in mathematical terms, we've got, this period, 3 months of the year, quarter of the year, where we can really make a massive difference to our bonsai, and you need to capitalize on it. It's not the sort of thing that you can sort of, I fertilize my trees in autumn. Well, how many times? Well, once. This is a time to be honest and accountable with your bonsai, because if you cut corners, if you don't do it quite as well as what you should, then we've just finished summer and you've seen how tough it is on your trees. Fertilizing through this period can make a massive difference next summer. So it's not something you're going to see the result of now, but I'd love you to look at your collection now, take photos of it, and then implement a good fertilizing strategy, along with everything else that we have to do with our trees, but implement a really good fertilizing strategy with your trees and take photos next year and do the comparison and see how they look. Do they look stronger? Do they look better? Has the growth doubled like it should? The rule of 1 to 2, one branch turns into 2 every year. Has that happened? If it hasn't, then part of the review process is a big one for me is, did I fertilize everything to the best of my ability? Did I give it the application that was required to ensure that it was as strong as it possibly could be? And more often than not, you'll find that your fertilizing might get done, but it's a breeze over. It's a skimming across the surface, especially as the weather starts to get colder and you're thinking, the trees aren't really doing very much. Don't need to fertilize these things. I beg to differ. I beg to differ because it's the time of the year, I think, when you're going to get biggest bang for your buck. One of the things that you've got to be careful of is starting too early or starting too late. For me, it's like watering. I'd rather overwater than underwater my trees. Underwatering is disastrous, as you know. Overwatering, it's not so pleasant for your trees either, but I find there's a bit more leeway with overwatering than what there is with underwatering. So fertilizing, I put into the same category. If you're unsure about when to start your fertilizing, is the tree, is it too hot? Like, is there an issue with fertilizing right now? Is it still growing? And my black pines after decantling, are they still pushing growth? If in doubt, as soon as autumn starts, start fertilizing. That's the best advice I can give you. But as time goes by and you become more sophisticated with your trees and you're more in tune with them, yeah, sure, there'll be some trees that you'll maybe hold back the fertilizer from right at this very early part of autumn. But if in doubt, fertilize. It's a simple philosophy that I use, a simple approach, because I'd rather start too early than too late. Because you start too late, you start missing that opportunity. Like I said, we've only got a limited window when we can fertilize our trees during this autumn period. So starting earlier for me is far better than starting too late. And why do we do it now? Because there's a few reasons. You think about it from your tree's point of view. They haven't been fed throughout the summer period. They've been flogged. They've had some really difficult weather they've had to deal with, some extremes, some hot, some dry, some windy, some soaking wet, depending on where you are around the country. But they've really struggled, and they've got through. They've done what they're meant to have done, hopefully with minimal damage, hopefully with no damage. But if they have, they've got through with a little bit of damage, and they're getting to the period now where the trees, realizing that the daylight hours are getting shorter, they're starting to pull nutrients back in from their foliage to build up. So what we're doing is we're going to try and replace some of those nutrients that have been depleted or used or soaked up by the tree during that hot period. So we want to make sure that we're giving them a well-balanced fertilizer, something all round. And this is me talking. This is what I do. What you do is, and I know this is a really contentious issue as to the type of fertilizer we use at different times of the year, but I make it really simple. I make it that it's repeatable and it's predictable what I do. So I use the tea bag method. If in doubt, have a look at Bonsai Matsu YouTube channel. You'll see it. I'm pretty sure that everyone knows what the tea bag fertilizing method is now. It's used far and wide. If you don't know, check it out. It's really important. I don't liquid feed my trees. Liquid feeding, if that's all you can do, then great. But it's one of those things that you need to be constantly onto. You can't just do it once and go, well, that's a month's fertilizing. It doesn't work that way because we water these trees in pots. We're flushing out that fertilizer every single time that we water, and it's really inefficient. It may provide a lot to the tree, not doubting that, but I find that you're going to be washing out far more of it than what the tree can take up. With the tea bag method, every time I water the trees, I find that I'm offering something to the tree, and it's either taking it or it's not taking it. Doesn't matter, because every time I water, I'm offering something more to the tree. The tea bags got to get replenished about every month, thereabouts. Who knows whether they're viable still at the end of the month, but I like to replace them at the end of the month because they're maybe not as strong as what they were. All the goodness has been leached out of them. Same principle as liquid feeding your trees. It's sooner or later it's going to run out. So replenish them every month. the amount of fertilizer I give them at this time of the year, as a ballpark, is about double what I'd give them in spring, because the fertilizing at this time of the year is strength building. It's building up the vigor of the tree as it's getting ready to go into winter dormancy. So if I can pump it into the tree and make it as strong as possible, then the issues I'm going to get, or I may have got somewhere down the track, if I hadn't fertilized my trees during that winter dormancy, like dieback, generally don't happen. They may still, but it generally doesn't happen as much when I'm strong fertilizing through this autumn period. So I'm double fertilizing. I'm offering only organics and a well-balanced feed to the tree, because the nutrients that need to be replaced, I can't put my finger on exactly which one it is for every single tree that I've got. So I just offer them everything. If they need it, they'll take it. If they need zinc, they need magnesium, they need whatever it is, by offering a well-balanced organic fertilizer, I know that it's going to give back to the tree what it needs, the trace elements that maybe have become exhausted. Whereas in my experience, if you go for a tailored fertilizer that's, high in something and low in something else, whatever it is, I find that maybe they're not quite as well balanced. And yeah, you might get benefit from it, but there could be further deficiencies that happen somewhere down the track. Maybe I don't get quite as much out of the tree by giving it that well-balanced fertilizer. But, after all these years, I've definitely got no complaints with what my trees look like when spring comes around. And I think that's, this is the old adage that I use when I take advice from people. First thing you should do is look at their bonsai. If their trees look like what you want your trees to look like, whatever they are, then follow that guidance. And I put myself out there on a platter every single day through any of the social platforms to say, here's my trees. This is what I do. I'm not hiding anything. I'm not saying use an organic general purpose fertilizer that you can get from a hardware store and then doing something secret in the background. It's very plain. It's very basic. It's achievable by every single person that ever has bonsai anywhere around the world, because this stuff's sold everywhere. It's manufactured everywhere. It's readily available. It's not something that you need to mail order from a foreign country and it takes you 6 months to get here, or it's it's the witch's potion that is going to fix all your problems when it comes to bonsai. It's not. Fertilizing is just one really important step in the process of building great bonsai. And it's only one. If you've got a terrible root system, then pumping 1 million ton of fertilizer into your tree is just not going to make a difference. You need to, this is just one of those steps along the way that allows you to achieve the greatest possible bonsai that you possibly can, and it makes a massive difference. So it's really simple, it's really easy, it's repeatable. I'm aiming to replenish nutrients. I'm trying to make the tree as strong as I possibly can. I want it to get through winter without any downside. And then when spring gets here, I want that thing jumping out of its skin. I want it to be as strong as it possibly can. And then my fertilizing strategy in spring may change based on how strong it is, depending on how advanced or mature that tree is. But at this time of the year, I'm really just trying to build them as strong as I possibly can. If you take a species like Japanese white pine, to now, in my collection, they've had very little fertilizer, because that fertilizing early in spring for an advanced Japanese white pine can really increase the length of the needles and distort the growth and really push the internode length out. So we don't have the tools like decandling or candle cutting that can be used on Japanese white pine. So really, fertilizing strategy is very important when it comes to Japanese white pine. But I know that now, as we head towards this period where it's not a growth period for the trees, it's a strength building period, this autumn period, I know that I can plow the fertilizer into this thing and I'm going to get massive build-up of strength. So when it comes to springtime and I'm saying, you know what, sorry fella, I can't give you any fertilizer because I don't want your needles to grow massive and I don't want your internodes to get beyond control, the tree's fine because it's got the strength that I've provided to it during this period. So that can really help with my strategy for fertilizing. And I think that's a really important point, is to talk about, what's your strategy with fertilizing at this time of year? What's your goal? What are you trying to achieve with your trees? And it's a really timely reminder to stop, to sit back, to look at your trees and go, okay, each one, what am I trying to achieve with you? Do I just want to build strength? All right, so it's going to be 4 tea bags of fertilizer for you because I really want to build your strength. All right, what am I trying to do with you? I want to make you super strong. All right, those tea bags are going to be replenished every 2 to 3 weeks because I want to make sure that I'm maximizing what's happened. Maybe it's a tree that's just been purchased that you're a bit worried about, that maybe hasn't done quite so well. You've aerated the soil, you've just got it through, and fertilizing is to build the strength for repotting, because that's the big thing that you've got to tick off with this tree. It's really important to not just become a robot and, okay, it's autumn, go and feed your trees. It's really nice to understand why you're doing it and the benefit that's going to come from it the other end as well. I think strong trees have very few, and I say this with caution, have lesser issues normally than weaker trees. When it comes to pests, a strong tree can fend off pests by itself, and you don't have to use harsh, nasty chemicals to keep the tree on the right track. You can let the tree fend for itself. Fungal issues don't become as much of an issue because the trees, it's stronger. It's got more in the tank to look after itself during this time, and this autumn feed is really important. Really, really, I can't stress that enough. And there's certain things like those little yellow balls, the Osmocote, the slow release fertilizer. My preference is not to use those, but if you've got dogs, I know what dogs do to these fertilizer tea bags when there's blood and bone in there, and they go berserk. They will tear shreds through them. You'll have wildlife, possums and rats tearing them off the trees as well. If the best you can possibly do is a slow release fertilizer, go for it. If the best you can do is liquid feeding, then go for it. But make sure that you're diligent with it. Don't just do it once a month and then that's enough. It might need to be, I don't know. It depends on your circumstance. It might be every 4 days, every week, whatever it is. And work your way up to whatever is the best possible scenario of what you can do with fertilizing your trees. But the one thing that I want everyone that listens to this podcast to do is make sure you take this opportunity. Don't miss it. Don't miss the chance to build the strength of your bonsai, because I guarantee your journey and your tree's journey along this path will be so much better from actively fertilizing for the next 3 odd months. When to stop's another thing for a future time, but as it gets too cold and daylight hours have diminished, yep, sure. If in doubt, fertilize for the 3-month window, and it won't hurt. It definitely won't hurt. Maybe it'll go a little bit longer than 3 months. Maybe it'll go a little bit less than 3 months. But all in all, if you do your job as the custodian of these beautiful little trees in pots for the next 3 months, then I guarantee you are going to look at these trees in spring. Maybe post-repotting, you won't believe how strong they are and how quickly they jump out of their skin once they are repotted. And putting them in good soil and ticking all those boxes for positioning and watering and all that sort of stuff, styling becomes so much more enjoyable when you've got a strong bonsai. So I'd really encourage everybody that's listening to this to make sure that you're doing the right thing by your trees and you do the right thing by yourself, and things will keep taking those massive steps forward. I did a beginner's course the other day, and I love it. I love the enthusiasm and freshness of a beginner, and especially I love all people that first walk through the door at Bonsai Matsu, but I love particularly those people that have never done bonsai before. They've had an inkling for a while. They love the look of them. They love the fascination of the horticultural side of keeping a tree in a pot. and they're fascinated by the artistic side of things as well. Most of them, when they first come in, that artistic side seems beyond their sort of skill set. But by the end of talking with them for 3 or 4 hours, they've got their confidence, and their eyes start opening to things, and it's that whole new world of bonsai, which I love it because I get to see it all the time. Whereas a lot of people who've done bonsai for a long time maybe don't get to see that spark, that first moment when they go, look at that, that is beautiful. And I really love it. I really, really love it. But it also gives me the opportunity to, I suppose, reassess and look at things that maybe I skim over myself, that I just take as part of the course for me when I'm working on trees and I'm styling trees, and I don't think about it. You do these things unconsciously. And one of them the other day was when we were styling these junipers, and we were pruning and trunk selection, and we were looking at fronts and all that sort of thing. And there was a point where the tree, you would put a little bit of wire on it, we'd give it the big cleanup, we'd position branches, and everything was looking great. And from a two-dimensional view, it was really nice. And that's when I said, oh, hang on a minute, it looks lovely, it looks really, really nice, and your picture's going to be fantastic. That's great, but you really need to think a little bit more about how this tree is going to grow, what the next step for this tree is going to be. And if you have it where the tree is positioning for branch placement, and you're not considering how they're going to grow and access to sunlight and all that sort of stuff, then you're going to have an issue with it. And it came about where the people had finished the tree. We looked at it and we went, yep, that looks really, really good. Let's just have a 2-second look at that. So we spun it around on the turntable, and I said, look at this from the side. Can you see those branches are pretty left and right? Like there's no spread. And they were like, oh, okay, yeah, I can sort of see it, but from here it looks really, really nice. I said, yeah, I use the image of a spiral staircase, where it's not a template for how to design your trees by any stretch of the imagination, but everything gets equal share of the sun. So then to really push the point home, to really pin it on the board, was we took the tree and put it on the ground. I said, now stand up and look down on that tree. Look down from the top. So you take the image of what the tree looks like from the front completely out of the equation, and you look from the top down. And it's something that I do regardless. I think about the placement of the branches as I'm designing a tree, but that top-down view is probably one of the most important things when it comes to how well the tree is going to take the next step, and whether your design is going to stay viable for the long term with this tree. So when we looked at it from the top down, you could very clearly see that there was sort of nothing coming towards the front of the tree, and there was next to nothing going towards the back of the tree, and everything was left and right, which is again really, really common. So what we'd do then is we would do that top-down view as well as the front view, and we would move and adjust those branches, sort of swinging them or arcing them around a little bit, just a little bit, so it didn't destroy the image of the front of the tree that the people had wanted when they were designing their trees, but it allowed us to give it some more depth to the tree. So as you looked at it, it became not only better or stronger horticulturally because each branch was getting its own amount of sunlight, but from the front there was greater depth behind the trunk, which I think is a really, I love it. I love those look-throughs where you've got that bit of negative space and you see, say, a back branch just tucked around the corner or something like that, that allows you to draw through and go. It gives it a 3D feel as opposed to a very two-dimensional flat image. And that top-down view is something that I'd strongly recommend everybody uses as one of the final steps in the finalization of your design. Like once you've done the work on the trees, just put the tree on the ground, as long as it's not, too tall. But I've even used it where I've stood on a milk crate or on a step ladder beside the tree to look down as well to try and get a feel for it, because it changes your perspective. I've talked about perspective in podcasts before, and I think that that's massively important when you are designing your bonsai, that change of height or change of position of the tree. Turntables are awesome because they give that to you, but this top-down view will really cement for you and allow you to take your bonsai to the next level. And I think that's really important, and it's a nice one to keep in the back of your mind, that when you finish, just do the top down, get those branches placed around. Won't make a massive difference to the front of the tree because they're still going to be in the same sort of area. Don't have it where I try and keep the branch as it stems from the trunk line. I'll only give it small leeway left and right. Like I won't arc the branches like a like a windswept tree, but I'll give them sort of say 15 degrees left or right from the position that they come out of the trunk. But that sort of 15-degree movement left or right from the position in the trunk can be enough to give you that greater volume, that greater depth, but also allow that branch to get full sunlight. If you want to see what happens to branches that don't get enough sunlight, then give it a crack. But you'll see that the ones that do get the sunlight get very, very strong, and those ones that don't seem to really grow at all. The trees are the tree's a great survivor. It's going to push resources where it thinks it's going to get best bang for its buck. And if it's not getting sunlight in those areas, I guarantee you it's going to start pulling resources from that area and moving it to the ones that are getting the sunlight, that are able to give it the sugars that it needs to survive. Even though that branch it's shaded might be so pretty and perfect for your design, it won't survive. So it's a top-down view, really nice thing just to tack on to right at the very end when you finish your design work on your tree. It's time to wrap it up and put a bow on it because we're done, folks. It's a great time of the year. I love it. I like I say, I do love summer. I do love the warm weather. But this time of the year when the trees really start to put on the deciduous that is, put on a great show for you, it's a really satisfying time for me too, because this fertilizing at this time of the year, I just know from experience that it does so much good for your trees, that when we come to spring and everything sort of starts to explode, I know that the goals that I've set on my trees to take that step forward for me, but whatever goals you've set on your trees, by doing the right thing now, it means that you're almost, not guaranteed, but so close to being guaranteed that your trees are going to achieve what you want them to achieve. If you've got, sacrifice branches and you want them to extend another meter, feed them now so when spring comes around you can top up that fertilizer and make them as strong as you possibly can and push them on. And it's definitely a time that my neighbours don't enjoy it quite as much because it does stink. That they're using the tea bags of blood and bone and a pellet fertilizer. I find that they stink for the first 4 or 5 days, and then they water in, and that seems to calm down a lot. But it does stink. I work on the rule of numbers when it comes to the pests around my yard that seem to enjoy this time of the year too, as there's less and less foliage for these possums to eat, and they decide that their tea bags are a viable alternative. I just keep ploughing numbers on there. If I put 4 on a tree and 1 goes missing, well, it's still 3. I can go out there and top it up again, and often I'll leave that tree alone and go to another one and take 1 from there. So if I'm just putting 1 tea bag on the trees, then yeah, sure, there'd be trees that'd miss out. But at this time of the year, I'm ploughing as much fertilizer on there as I possibly can because it's that strength building. It's the time I'm going to get the most out of my trees, and I want to make sure that it's really, really a positive time for them. Make sure you use that top-down view too. It makes a big difference, I think, to your overall composition, and it'll become something which becomes more natural for you. But it is a nice reminder to look at your trees from a different angle, different perspective, and make sure that they're doing as well as they possibly can. If you look at any trees in nature, in forest or wherever, anything that doesn't get sun isn't going to grow, or it's going to die eventually. It's going to get weaker and weaker, and you don't want that to happen with your bonsai. You want these branches that we position and style that we've chosen for our tree to keep taking steps forward. So putting them in a different angle, a different position, I think that you're going to see a massive improvement on the tree. So it's definitely something you should have a crack at. Thanks, guys and gals. I really appreciate it. Thanks to the subscribers. If you do feel like subscribing and supporting the podcast, please do. There's a link in the notes for the show, the podcast. It's greatly appreciated, and I love the support. I love every single bonsai lover that listens to this podcast too. These trees are cuddle for me, and until next time, as always, happy bonsai.